In the winter of 1961, a farmhouse in Berks County, Pennsylvania was sold for the first time in 72 years. The new owner, a developer from Reading, walked through the property in October and decided to replace the heating system before his family moved in. The cast iron stove in the central room was old. The firebox design looked nothing like anything sold in modern catalogs. He had it removed and installed a propane forced air system before December. His heating bill that first winter was $412. The family that had lived in that house since 1889 had never paid a heating bill. Not a dollar, not once. The same cast iron stove, burning wood cut from the same woodlot, had heated 3,200 square feet of Pennsylvania farmhouse through 72 winters on less than a cord of wood per season. I found the record of the stove's removal in the county property archive. I found the original construction specifications for the stove in a collection of farm building documents held by the Berks County Heritage Center. The documents were donated by the family when they sold the property. They had been sitting in the archive since 1962, indexed but never requested. I requested them in March. The design feature that made that stove work the way it did has not appeared in any commercially manufactured wood stove since 1947. Every stove currently sold in the United States, every wood stove, every pellet stove, every insert, every freestanding unit lacks this feature. The industry that manufactures them is not unaware of it. It appears in their own engineering literature from the mid-20th century as a recognized efficiency mechanism. It simply does not appear in the products they sell. A stove that heats your house on half a cord of wood per winter costs you approximately $150 in fuel annually at current firewood prices in Pennsylvania. A comparable propane system costs between $2,000 and $4,000 per winter depending on the severity of the season. The man in Reading who replaced the Amish stove in 1961 paid more for heating in his first year than the Amish family paid in any 10-year period during the preceding 7 decades. The mechanic whose farmhouse I have been visiting in Berks County throughout this series, Levi Hoover, whose grandfather built the solar water heater I described in a previous video, has a wood stove in his central room that his great-grandfather built in 1923. It is not the original stove from 1889. It is a replacement built to the same design by a man who had seen the original and understood what made it work. Levi heats his house on less than a cord of wood per winter. His propane neighbors spend between $2,500 and $3,500 on heating annually. He spends approximately $160 on firewood, cut from his own woodlot. I asked him to explain the stove to me. He walked me through it the way he walks through everything. Directly, without drama, in the plain language of someone describing a thing that simply works the way he expects it to work because it has always worked that way. Here is what he showed me. The stove has 2 fireboxes. Not one. 2 distinct combustion chambers connected by a regulated passage between them. The primary firebox is where you load the wood and where the initial combustion occurs. This is a standard firebox by any measure. Wood burns in the primary chamber, producing hot gases and heat. In a conventional stove, those hot gases rise directly up the flue and exit through the chimney. The heat they carry exits with them. A conventional stove with a well-burning fire sends a significant portion of its heat directly up the chimney because the combustion gases are still carrying thermal energy when they exit. The secondary firebox changes this completely. The hot gases from the primary combustion before they reach the flue are directed through a narrow, regulated passage into a secondary chamber. The passage is designed to slow the gas flow and increase turbulence. In the secondary chamber, the gases cool slightly, lose velocity, and mix with a controlled introduction of air that allows incomplete combustion products to burn a second time. This secondary combustion captures the energy that would otherwise exit through the flue as unburned fuel. A conventional wood stove operating at typical efficiency burns approximately 60 to 70% of the available energy in the wood. The rest exits as combustion gases, particulates, and unburned hydrocarbons. The dual firebox design with secondary combustion captures a significant portion of that remaining 30 to 40%. The secondary chamber also functions as a radiant heat accumulator. The walls of the secondary chamber absorb heat from the secondary combustion and radiate it into the room over a period of hours after the fire has died down. Conventional cast iron stoves radiate heat only while the fire is burning. This stove radiates heat for 6 to 8 hours after the last wood has burned to ash. The combination of higher combustion efficiency and extended radiant heat output means that significantly less wood produces the same amount of heat delivered to the living space. Levi's stove requires fewer fires per day in winter than a conventional stove would require to maintain the same interior temperature. Less wood burned, less time loading the stove, less ash to clean, less money spent on firewood. The design principle behind the secondary combustion chamber is not new or obscure. Every modern high-efficiency catalytic wood stove uses a version of it. The EPA's Clean Air Standards for wood heaters, implemented in 1988 and updated in 2020, actually require secondary combustion or catalytic combustion in new wood stoves sold in the United States, because the secondary burn reduces particulate emissions as well as increasing efficiency. What the modern EPA-certified stoves implement in catalytic form is functionally identical to what Levi's great-grandfather implemented in cast iron in 1923. The mechanism is the same. The secondary combustion happens in a different way, through a catalytic converter rather than a secondary firebox, but the result, more complete combustion, more heat to the room, less fuel consumed, is identical. The difference is in the radiant mass. Modern high-efficiency stoves are engineered to produce maximum heat output during active burning. They are made from steel plate or thin cast iron, which heats quickly and cools quickly. They are optimized for the burn cycle, not for the hours after the fire dies. Levi's stove is massive. The walls of the secondary chamber are 3 inches of cast iron. The top slab is 4 inches. The total weight of the stove is approximately 900 pounds. The thermal mass is enormous. When the secondary chamber reaches operating temperature, which takes approximately 90 minutes from a cold start, it has stored a significant quantity of thermal energy in that mass. The fire can die completely and the stove continues radiating heat into the room for 6 to 8 hours as the mass slowly releases its stored energy. In practical terms, this means Levi builds 1 fire in the morning and 1 fire in the evening, 2 fires per day in the coldest weather. Each fire burns for 3 to 4 hours. The stove radiates heat from its mass for 6 to 8 hours after each fire. The room temperature stays within a comfortable range continuously without requiring the fire to be maintained continuously. A conventional wood stove or fireplace insert requires more frequent loading to maintain temperature because the thin metal cools quickly and stops radiating as soon as the fire drops. More frequent loading means more total wood consumed and more attention to the stove throughout the day. The Berks County Heritage Center documents show that the original 1889 stove was built by a blacksmith and iron founder named Heinrich Bauer, who had emigrated from Bavaria in 1871. The design he used was a version of a German Kachelofen, a masonry heater with deep roots in Central European farmhouse construction going back to the medieval period. The Kachelofen principle is exactly the dual firebox with massive radiant body that I have described. The German, Scandinavian, and Russian versions of this stove design have been continuously in use in those countries for centuries. The Finnish equivalent, called a tulikivi, is still manufactured and sold in Finland as a premium heating solution for architects and home builders who understand thermal mass heating. In the United States, the design arrived with German immigrant communities in Pennsylvania and Ohio in the 18th and 19th centuries. It persisted in those communities, including the Amish, because it worked better than anything that replaced it. It disappeared from mainstream American construction when the natural gas and fuel oil industries built the distribution infrastructure that made central heating cheap enough to compete on initial installation cost. The Kachelofen requires a significant initial investment in materials and skilled labor to build. A properly constructed masonry heater in a new home costs between $5,000 and $15,000. A gas furnace installation costs between $2,000 and $5,000. On initial cost, the gas furnace wins. Over 20 years of operation in a cold climate, the economics reverse completely. The gas furnace operating cost at current natural gas prices in Pennsylvania is between $2,000 and $3,000 per year. A masonry heater burning wood from a farm woodlot costs approximately $100 to $200 per year in fuel. The 20-year operating cost difference is between $36,000 and $58,000. The Berks County family who sold their property in 1961 had been heating their house for 72 years at approximately $150 per year in today's equivalent firewood cost. Total heating cost across 72 years, approximately $10,800. The developer who replaced their stove with propane has spent, by the most conservative estimate using current propane prices and 72 years of operation, approximately $144,000 on heating the same house. The stove that produced the $10,000 result weighs 900 pounds and contains no moving parts. It has no filters to replace, no pilot light to relight, no combustion sensor to fail, no blower motor to burn out. It burns wood. Wood has been available in Pennsylvania since before anyone recorded prices for it. Here is what the 1923 construction documents show for dimensions and materials, because I want to give you something practical before this video ends. The primary firebox is 22 inches wide, 16 inches deep, and 14 inches high. The firebox opening is 12 inches high and 18 inches wide with a cast iron door. The firebox floor is a cast iron grate allowing ash to fall into a collection drawer below. The passage between the primary and secondary chamber is controlled by a cast iron baffle plate positioned to restrict gas flow and increase turbulence. The baffle position is adjustable through a lever mechanism to regulate the secondary burn intensity. The secondary chamber is 18 inches wide, 18 inches deep, and 20 inches high. Its walls are 3-inch cast iron on all sides and 4-inch on the top. The secondary chamber connects to the flue at the top rear. The total firebox unit sits inside a masonry surround of fire brick and common brick, which adds additional thermal mass and provides the radiating surface that continues releasing heat for hours after the fire dies. The brick surround is 3 feet wide, 2.5 feet deep, and 5 feet high. Total weight of the complete unit with masonry surround is approximately 2,000 pounds. This is not a project for a weekend. Building a masonry heater correctly requires either significant masonry skill or a qualified mason. The fire brick joints must be laid with refractory mortar capable of withstanding the temperature cycling of regular use. The flue connection and clearances must meet local building codes. But I want to be clear about what the alternative is. The alternative is between $2,000 and $4,000 per winter, every winter, for as long as you own the house. At that rate, the cost of hiring a mason to build a proper masonry heater pays for itself in 4 to 6 years of fuel savings, after which you are heating your house on firewood you can cut yourself or purchase locally for a fraction of what any fossil fuel will ever cost. The Amish communities in Berks County and Lancaster County and Holmes County and every other settlement across the eastern United States have been making this calculation continuously since the 19th century. They do not make it with spreadsheets. They make it with the knowledge of what their grandparents paid for heat and what they pay for heat, and the two numbers are different in a way that makes the choice obvious. Levi Hoover has never paid more than $200 in a single winter for heating. His propane neighbors have never paid less than $2,000. He has been watching them pay it since he was old enough to understand what a heating bill was. He told me once that he does not think much about the stove. He loads it in the morning and he loads it in the evening. It is just there, the way the well is just there and the water heater is just there. Things that work do not require much thought. That is what the industry that sells you a monthly gas bill took from you. Not just money, the ability to stop thinking about it. I want to address the objection that masonry heaters are impractical for most American homes, because I hear a version of it every time this subject comes up. People say their house is not built for a 2,000-pound stove. Their floors cannot support the weight. Their ceilings are too low. Their existing chimney is not compatible. These concerns are real in some cases. In many cases, they dissolve under examination. Floor load capacity is the most common concern. A 2,000-pound masonry heater concentrated on a 4 square foot footprint creates approximately 500 pounds per square foot of point load. Standard residential floor framing is engineered for 40 pounds per square foot of live load and the dead load of the structure above. A point load of 500 pounds per square foot on a residential floor is beyond standard framing capacity without reinforcement. This is solvable. The solution is to position the heater on the ground floor directly over a concrete foundation, which is standard practice in every Amish farmhouse that has one. A heater positioned over a concrete basement floor or a poured concrete slab on grade requires no special floor reinforcement. The load transfers directly to the foundation. In a house with a full basement, the heater can be positioned against a bearing wall with its weight transferred through the floor framing to a footing. A structural engineer can specify the reinforcement required for any specific case. The cost of the reinforcement is typically between $500 and $1,500. The chimney issue is also solvable. A masonry heater requires a dedicated flue sized for its specific output. In a house with an existing masonry chimney, a liner can often be installed to create a dedicated flue for the new heater. In a house without an existing chimney, a prefabricated insulated metal chimney system can serve a masonry heater at a fraction of the cost of a new masonry chimney. Building permits are required for masonry heater installation in most jurisdictions. The permit process is standard. A masonry heater that is properly constructed and inspected is the safest heating appliance available. It contains no combustible materials, no pressurized fuel, no electronic ignition system, no gas lines. It is a box of brick that gets hot and cools slowly. The risk profile is straightforward. The Berks County Heritage Center documents show that the Bauer family, who built the original 1889 stove, obtained a building permit from the township for the firebox construction. The permit records are still in the county archive. The permit was issued without conditions. The inspector signed off after examining the firebox to wall clearances and the flue connection. Building permits for masonry heaters in 1889 Pennsylvania were routine. They are routine now. The stove itself is not the obstacle. The knowledge of what it is and what it does is the obstacle, and that knowledge has been quietly absent from American home heating conversations since the 1950s. I want to tell you about one more practical option for people who want the thermal mass principle without the full masonry heater project. Soapstone stove inserts are manufactured by several companies in the United States and Europe and are available for between $3,000 and $6,000 installed. Soapstone has significantly higher thermal mass per unit weight than cast iron. A soapstone surround on a modern high-efficiency firebox produces extended radiant heating for 4 to 6 hours after the fire dies, similar in principle to the Kachelofen design, but in a form that fits in a standard fireplace opening and requires no special floor reinforcement. The fuel efficiency is not as high as a full masonry heater because the firebox itself is smaller and the secondary combustion is catalytic rather than chamber-based. But it is significantly more efficient than a conventional steel or cast iron insert, and the extended radiant period means fewer fires per day in cold weather. Levi Hoover does not have a soapstone insert. He has a 900-pound cast iron stove that his great-grandfather built in 1923. But for anyone who cannot build or install a full masonry heater, the soapstone insert is the closest available approximation to the thermal mass principle at a manageable project scale. The principle is what matters. Mass absorbs heat during the burn and releases it slowly after. The more mass, the longer the release. The longer the release, the fewer fires you need to maintain comfort. The fewer fires, the less wood. The less wood, the lower the fuel cost. The lower the fuel cost, the further you are from the gas meter. That is the chain. Every link in it connects back to a 900-pound cast iron stove in a farmhouse in Berks County that has been making the same argument since 1923 without saying a word. I want to go deeper on the wood itself, because the fuel side of this equation is as important as the stove design, and the Amish approach to wood management is as far from modern practice as the stove design is. Levi Hoover does not buy firewood. He cuts it from his own woodlot, approximately 12 acres of mixed hardwood on the northeast slope of his property. He cuts in late winter or early spring, while the sap is down and the wood is at its driest natural state. He splits immediately after cutting. He stacks in a specific configuration that he describes as what his grandfather taught him, and what I recognized when I researched it as a Scandinavian drying method that maximizes airflow through the stack. The stack is built in a circular formation rather than a linear row. The outer ring is stacked bark side out and bark side up. The inner fill is stacked randomly, creating irregular gaps throughout. The top is capped with bark side up pieces that shed rain. Air moves through the circular stack from multiple directions simultaneously, and the cap keeps the worst moisture off the drying wood. Linear stacks covered with tarps, the standard method most American firewood processors use, create moisture traps. The tarp prevents airflow over the top of the stack while the sides continue to exchange moisture with the air. Wood under tarps often does not dry fully in a single season and burns with higher moisture content than properly stacked unsheltered wood. Levi's wood, cut in March, split immediately and stacked in the circular formation through spring and summer, reaches 12 to 15% moisture content by the following November burning season. Wood at this moisture content burns at significantly higher efficiency than wood at 20 to 25% moisture, which is the typical moisture content of commercially sold seasoned firewood. Higher moisture content wood requires more of its combustion energy to vaporize the water before the wood itself can burn. The water does not contribute to heat output. It absorbs heat and reduces the temperature of the combustion process. Lower combustion temperature means less complete secondary burn in the secondary chamber and lower efficiency overall. Levi's wood, properly dried to 12 to 15%, burns hot and clean. The secondary combustion in the secondary chamber operates at high efficiency because the primary combustion is producing high temperature gases. The stove reaches its full operating temperature faster and maintains it more consistently. This is another element of the system that the firewood industry has no incentive to promote. Properly dried wood burned in an efficient stove consumes significantly less wood to produce the same heat output. Less wood consumed means less wood purchased. Commercially sold firewood is sold by the cord. The seller benefits from higher moisture content that reduces per cord efficiency and requires the buyer to purchase more cords. Levi buys no firewood. He produces his own and dries it correctly. The combination of his stove design and his wood management means he has been heating his house for $100 to $160 per year in labor time equivalent since his great-grandfather built the stove. I want to tell you one more thing that is specific to the Berks County construction documents and that I have not seen described anywhere else. The 1889 construction notes by Heinrich Bauer include a passage about what he calls the morning fire and the evening fire. He describes the morning fire as a smaller, hotter fire using split hardwood pieces no larger than 3 inches in diameter. He describes the evening fire as a larger fire using full-diameter splits loaded to maximum primary firebox capacity. The reasoning he gives is this. The morning fire brings the stove from overnight cool-down temperature to full operating temperature as quickly as possible, using small pieces that ignite and burn hot rapidly. The evening fire, loaded at full capacity with full-diameter splits, burns more slowly and stores more heat in the secondary chamber mass to sustain the room through the coldest hours of the night. The 2 fire per day rhythm is not just a convenience, it is a thermal management strategy. The morning fire recovers the heat loss of the night. The evening fire preloads the thermal mass for the night. Between those 2 fires, the mass radiates and the room stays comfortable without any additional loading. I timed Levi loading his stove. Both fires combined, from opening the firebox door to closing it and wiping his hands, took 11 minutes total on the day I watched. 11 minutes of physical engagement with the heating system per day. No thermostat to set, no filter to replace, no technician to call. 11 minutes of opening a door, loading wood, and closing a door. His propane neighbors engage with their heating systems by writing checks. Different kinds of engagement, with different financial outcomes. The stove in the Berks County Heritage Center archive has been there since 1962. The documents describing it have been there since 1962. The design knowledge they contain has been accessible to anyone who requested the file for 63 years. Nobody requested it before I did. Tell me in the comments what you currently pay for heating in your coldest months and what state you live in. I am documenting the regional variation in this across the audience, and the numbers I am collecting are more striking than I expected. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next week, I am covering the Amish Natural Medicine Cabinet. The Flexner Report of 1910, funded by the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations, which held significant investments in the pharmaceutical industry, resulted in the closure of most American medical schools that taught botanical medicine. Before 1910, every American household had a working knowledge of 12 to 15 plants that treated the most common illnesses without a pharmacy visit. I found the 1908 edition of King's American Dispensatory in the Berks County Heritage Center archive. What it contains will change how you look at the plants growing in your yard. Stay with me. There is more.